Hello, all you beautiful, friendly people, otherwise known as friendlies. Today I'm going to talk about what to expect as a full-time RVer or van dweller, and not necessarily just what to expect your first few days or months out, but really what to expect long-term as someone who lives a nomadic lifestyle, especially someone like me who lives on public lands. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of things to consider before jumping into this lifestyle, and I hope today's video is going to help you and give you some things to think about whether you're planning to live this lifestyle or not. It just might be interesting to kind of hear what goes into leading a nomadic life. So I'm going to break today's talk into 3 different sections. Number 1, I'm going to talk about the adjustment period, both before, preparing for, and once you are on the road living this lifestyle, what that adjustment period is going to look like. Number 2, I'm going to talk about fear and safety, because that is definitely a part of this lifestyle for everybody, but I think especially for women, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And finally, number 3, I'm going to talk about self-care, the things that we need to do not only to be safe and comfortable on the road, but also to be happy, to thrive out here. And so those are the 3 sections I am going to talk about today as it relates to what to expect living in an RV. Ready? Nobody gonna do it for you. Got to find your own. Number 1, let's talk about the adjustment period. There is definitely going to be an adjustment period. Like, the planning part can be a lot of fun. You're selling things, you're researching, hopefully. You're buying the new RV. Hopefully you're taking the RV out, you're learning the RV before you're actually kind of thrown into it and living it. I hope that you're taking it out at least on a couple weekends or day trips to kind of learn the feel of it and how to drive it and how to empty your tanks and how your systems work. I hope that you're doing all that before you actually hit the road. But the other parts of an adjustment period might include things like self-doubt. You're probably wondering, as you get closer especially, and as the adrenaline starts pumping and your nerves start going and you're seeing your house or your apartment clear out, or maybe the sale has gone through, you're starting to have self-doubt. I know I did. Especially the day I was driving out of my backyard. I was like, what the heck am I doing? This is crazy. And yeah, you know what? It's a little, I don't want to say crazy, but it's a big step. I also had that same feeling when I set out for my John Muir hike, when I was preparing for my Pacific Crest Trail hike. So any big change in your life, I think, is going to have a certain amount of self-doubt and like, what the hell am I doing-ism, right? I've been telling people in comments for years, if you didn't have a little concern, if you weren't a little nervous, if you didn't have a little self-doubt, I would think there's something wrong with you, because, or you're a sociopath or something, right? Because to make a big change in your life without having any feelings or any stress or anxiety around it, I don't think would be normal. You know, going out on a limb and saying that, I don't want to be judgmental, but I think most people are going to have some feelings of nervousness around it. So that self-doubt during that adjustment period, mostly leading up to the big event, the big day, and also probably the days and weeks surrounding it, when everything is new and the uncertain and you're like, what have I done? So yeah, self-doubt is going to be a part of your experience and something to expect, not to be afraid of, not to make you think that, oh, if I have all this self-doubt, I shouldn't be doing it. It just comes with the territory. It's just part of the transition. The second part of the adjustment period might be dealing with family and friends who think you're crazy and who may not be supportive, and having to deal not only with your own feelings of anxiousness and concern, but also having to worry about other people who may not be on board with that as well. So that might also be something that I want to make you aware of that now if you are in the very early stages of thinking about this lifestyle. For people with very tight-knit or enmeshed families, that is going to be something that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have your own worries and concerns to deal with. You're also going to have to contend with family. And if you don't know how you're going to handle that, if your family isn't supportive, check out up here. I did a video on exactly that subject, and what to do when your family's not on board, and some really good tips. So I'm not going to get into detail about that because I've already done a video. So go ahead and check that out up here, or at the end of this video, I'll put a link. So that's the second part of the adjustment period, is dealing with family and friends. Third part of the adjustment period that I want to talk about, and this is really going to relate to the day that you hit the road, is there is going to be so much uncertainty. Everything is brand new. Life as you have known it for as long as you've been on this planet is about to change. Most of us, from the time we were born, had a static, stationary, sticks and bricks home to go to. Most of us have had a steady job and steady income, a steady paycheck. Most of us have had family and friends who could be there with a phone call or a text if something went wrong. Most of us have the security of a traditional life, right? And there is so much that goes into that security of that life that you may not even realize right now you have. But as soon as you hit the road, especially, like I said, if you're going to be living the way I live, moving from public lands every couple weeks, everything is going to be turned upside down. Everything that you have known and have relied on as far as comfort and safety is going to be gone most of the time. So everything that you have come to rely on is going to change. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be gone, and I'm going to get to self-care in number 3. And how to maybe prepare for some of these things. But everything is going to be new. Where am I going to sleep tonight? Where am I going to be sleeping next week? Where do I get water? Where do I get groceries? Where do I do laundry? Where am I going to get my mail next? I mean, everything is going to be completely fluid and completely up in the air from now on. When you're living in a house, you take the garbage out to the curb every Thursday. You have your favorite grocery store. You have your favorite dentist. You have your favorite hairstylist. You know, when you go inside and turn on the faucet, you're going to have water every time. You're not going to have those things anymore. It's all going to take some thought. It's all going to take some planning. And things that you take for granted just aren't going to be there to take for granted. Everything that you do from now on is going to take a little bit of thought and planning. And I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to say that it's constant work, although I guess in some ways it is, but it doesn't take long, especially if you aren't a creature of habit. If you're a flexible person, especially, it's probably going to be easier for you than someone who is very dogmatic and somebody who's very rigid and very regimed. It's going to take maybe a little bit extra planning. If you're the type of person who, you can't just hit the road in the morning without knowing where you're going to sleep that night, that's fine. You can still do this lifestyle. Just know that it's going to take more planning. But if you're like me and you're like, okay, I know what direction I'm going, I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight, and I'm okay with that. That's part of the fun and part of the adventure. But just know that that's part of this life. Sure, you can plan, but I always say, you can plan and plan and plan and plan, but stuff's still going to go wrong, right? And so you always have to be prepared for uncertainty. You always have to be prepared for the what if. And since that is a reality of this life, I think that if you are a person who needs to plan and doesn't do well in adversity, doesn't do well when things go wrong, you don't really think on your feet, you get really stressed really easily, I think the best advice I have is to always have a backup plan. Never assume something is going to work out, especially if you're going someplace you've never been before and you're going to a new town, you're going to a new forest, you've looked at freecampsites.net and you see a campsite and you think that that's going to work out. Always have a backup plan. Always have a plan B. Always. And that is really going to help you deal with some of the uncertainties that you're going to deal with on the road. And some of the other uncertainties that you're definitely going to be dealing with, especially if you don't take the time to get to know your rig before you move into it, is how your rig works. I think I had my rig 2 months before I went out on the road, maybe a month and a half. I actually lived in it in the backyard of my former apartment. That kind of worked out well because my former landlords were going on a trip, and so I house sat for them while the new tenant moved into my old place. And so I lived in the backyard for 3-4 weeks, I guess. So I really got to understand how my rig worked by living in it in a safe environment for the first month, which really helped me. I had to fill propane. I had to go empty the tanks. Yeah, I was plugged into shore power, and but I got to kind of learn at least some of the electrics of being on shore power. I also did take it out for a weekend and boondocked to learn how my systems worked in a boondocking environment, so that if anything did break, if I didn't understand anything, I had access, I had a safe place to go back to figure things out. And I really think that that is a smart way to go. Go out, drive the RV, test all the systems, use all the systems, learn the systems in a safe environment before. Don't go 50 miles out on a crazy dirt road in the middle of nowhere with no internet connection to test your systems for the first time. That would just be kind of insane, honestly. Well, I don't know, unless you really like adventure and you really don't mind figuring things out as you go. You're going to have so much uncertainty and so many unknowns when you start this life. I think having your home, your living space, your rig as one of those unknowns, I think could really reel you into chaos and reel you into a state of stress that you don't need. So understanding your home and how it works is going to be one more step toward the adjustment, the adjusting to being in a new environment all the time, being in a new forest, being in public lands, and all the other things that you have to deal with. And I think for me, you know, really having been settled into my RV for a good month before I hit the road, I think really helped me to be able to face all the other uncertainties, even with my rig and all the breakdowns and all the crap I had the first year. Check out the playlist up here if you want to see what that was all about. But I think really being comfortable and settled in my home helped me deal with a lot of the other unknowns and all the other stresses that were thrown at me my first year on the road. So I highly recommend doing that. Again, I can't stress enough that everything that you have known in life is about to change. It's about to completely turn upside down. And don't take that lightly. That's huge. That is a huge adjustment. It's going to cause stress. It's going to cause anxiety. It's going to cause self-doubt. And it's going to creep up on you probably when you don't even realize it. And it might even be like an underlying anxiety or fear that you don't even recognize. But I'm hoping that by bringing this to your attention now, if you're on the road in your first week or first month or first 6 months or first year, and you're kind of like, why am I feeling just ick? I hope that you'll be able to think back on this video and go, oh yeah, I just made a huge change in my life. This is a big fucking deal. No wonder I'm feeling this way. And that's really what the goal of this video is to help you kind of recognize within yourself, yeah, this is fucking huge. I just did something really big. I have every right to be feeling what I'm feeling. Okay? Everybody is going to be different. Your adjustment period could be a week, could be 6 months, could be a year, could be 3 years. And so just be kind to yourself and maybe just be aware that everything that you have known in life, all of your life, is about to change. And it's a big deal. So the second thing that I want to talk about is the fear that you're going to face being on the road. Fear, again, is a fact of life unless you're a sociopath. And this is coming from someone who says I have an unhealthy absence of fear. I'm not afraid of a lot. There's really not a lot. And if you've watched me for a while, you know that I'm not risk averse. In fact, I thrive by taking risks. Healthy risks, conscious risks for me is what I thrive on. It's what I do to feel alive. But that may not be you. And even with my unhealthy absence of fear, there are times that I'm feeling a little afraid or uncertain, I think is the best way to describe what I feel. Some situations that might terrify you, I feel uncertain. And I want to bring this up because I want you to prepare for this. This is a fact of life. When you're living alone, I think especially as a woman, on public lands, in the middle of nowhere, or sometimes like now I'm on a road where people are coming by all the time, there are times you're going to feel uncertain or afraid. What is that person doing who just drove down my road and they're sitting there and they're not doing anything? There have been times, remember, I've been blocked in by rowdy partiers where I literally didn't have a way out other than going through this party crowd. I have been approached by strangers that after the fact realized could have been extremely dangerous to me. And so there are going to be a lot of times when you're going to be laying in bed at night. You think you're alone, you haven't seen another person for a week, and all of a sudden a truck drives up and shines their headlights right in your rear window, and you're going to be laying there and you're going to go, what the hell? What do I do? And my best advice is to know before that happens what you're going to do. Sometimes it's hard for some of us to think on our feet. When we're faced with a stressful situation, when we're scared, when we're nervous, we don't always think on our feet. Some of us tend to kind of break down and cry or get immobilized by our fear. So my best advice for you is to run through all the possible scenarios of what might happen when you're on the road alone and have a plan. And this is for everybody. I think it's helpful for everybody to do this so that if you're in a situation where you do think you're out in the middle of nowhere and this strange truck rolls up, you have a plan. What should I do? What would I do in a situation like that? And I urge you to not panic. I urge you to think it through ahead of time so that you have a plan, but that plan is going to consist of, okay, well, if that truck gets there within, 30 seconds and shines their lights, am I going to jump in the driver's seat and go? Or no, I think it would make more sense to kind of peek out the window, see what's going on, and leave when I feel threatened. Okay, well, what does that mean? What would it mean for me to feel threatened? Would the person have to get out of the truck? Would the person have to knock on the door? Would the person have to have a gun? Would the person have to have a baseball bat? So I think it's really important for you to decide for yourself what a threat would look like, and then have your plan for action worked out. Because like I said, there's going to be times, no matter what, I think this is going to be a fact of life, where you may not be terrified or you may not feel like your life is in danger. There will be times when you feel uncertain and unsure of what to do. You're approached by a strange guy. You're approached by a strange woman. You get a knock on the door in the middle of the night, which happened to me quite a bit my first year. So these things are bound to happen. And I'm bringing this up because I don't want these to be deal breakers for you. I don't want these to be things that are going to make you say, oh no, I don't want to do it, or oh my God, if that happens, I'm going to run home and I'm never going to live in an RV again. I want to bring this to your attention now because this is a reality of RV life. And I want to shed some lightness, some awareness on that so that you can help prepare yourself for it. What will you do? What does a threat look like? When will you act? How will you act? What will you do? What will you do to protect yourself in any given situation? By having a plan ahead of time and knowing how to identify a dangerous situation versus something that's just what it is, just making your mind race. Remember, this is what I believe. Everybody is out in the world doing their own thing. That one time the truck did come up and shine their light in my windows. Regardless of whether I was there or not, they were just there doing their thing. People are just living their own lives, like not even concerned with me, not even concerned that I'm there most of the time. So even when a car comes driving down a road in the middle of the night, I can now, after 3 years experience being on the road, I can say, okay, they're just doing their thing. Came here to make out, came here to do drugs, came here to hunt, whatever. As long as I don't bother them, they won't bother me. And that has been the case. But it's important for you to learn how to identify a potentially dangerous situation. And again, go back to the planning. What would a dangerous situation look like to you? And I think it's important to know that ahead of time so that you're not scrambling in the moment, you're not overrun by fear, and you're not paralyzed by that fear. I think it's really important to know ahead of time. And then also in that planning, I think it's important to identify when is your go point. When is your, okay, you know what, I've had enough. Whether it's a dangerous situation or just an annoyance, when have you had enough? Maybe planning ahead for when's your go. When is that time that you get out of bed, you grab your key, seat, and you take off? I mean, the beauty of living on wheels is that we can do that. When something is bothering us, we can just drive away. And I've driven away a lot of times, sometimes just out of annoyance, sometimes out of concern for, I don't know what's going to happen next, and my gut is telling me that I should probably go. And of course, I've said ad nauseum now in videos that your number one defense for anything and your number one tool for taking care of yourself is your gut. Your brain takes in millions of pieces of data that you don't even realize it's taking in. A friend of mine recommended a book called The Gift of Fear, written by, I think it's Beckman, the FBI agent. I strongly recommend that book. It's been really, really good and really helpful for me. And what the book is really about is just giving examples of how our brain is a data bank, pulling in millions of points of data and feeding our defense mechanisms, and we don't even realize it. And that's why we have a gut feeling, because our gut knows things, because our brain is feeding that data that we're not even conscious of. So if you've got a nicky feeling like I had on the Highway of Tears about that guy, something just told me I needed to flee, and I fled, and it's a good thing I did. So knowing when your go point is and learning to trust your gut. And for many of us, learning to trust our gut is a process. I never trusted my gut, and that's why I've had so many bad relationships. And it really took me a third party. It really took me a therapist to point out to me time and time and time and time and time again, your gut was right on that, wasn't it? Your gut was right. And really, by being able to point that out to me over years of working together, I now know my gut has a batting average of 1,000. My gut is never wrong. Never. My gut and my head. And that's the thing. You really have to learn the difference between what your gut is telling you and what your head is telling you, because your head oftentimes wants to talk you out of what your gut is telling you, right? Our mind starts saying, no, you're fine, no. And especially, again, I think women, we tend to minimalize things. We tend to trust when we shouldn't trust. And I don't want to get into all the reasons I think that's true, but we really are raised to, it's really weird. We're raised in some ways by media and everything to fear people and men, and in one way, and in another way, we're taught to trust every man we meet because of the society that we live in, and men have held powerful roles, right, in the police and doctors and attorneys. For the most part, some of those have been very male-dominated fields. They're changing. So on the other hand, we're taught to trust men. And I think that's probably what creates a lot of confusion for us sometimes. So learning to trust your gut, for many of us who are lucky enough to maybe have strong influences in our life, you learn to trust your gut early. But for those of us who grew up in chaos, where we were exactly the opposite, taught, no, your gut is wrong for all the chaotic reasons and all the abuse and everything, many of us are taught to exactly the opposite, to not trust our gut. And so I had to relearn that natural instinct that we all have. And you may have to relearn that too, and it might take practice. But if you can learn to tune into your gut, that will go a long, long, long way toward keeping you safe, because I believe that by listening to our gut, it gets us out of potentially dangerous situations before we need to get to the point of self-defense and fighting back and bear spray and guns and ice axes and bats and stuff. That's really what I believe, that this is going to prevent us from even needing to get that far in the process of self-defense. Fear, I guess my bottom line is that it's going to happen. And when it does happen, I want you to know that that's just part of the process. It's not something to run from. It's not a reason to think that you have failed in some way. It's that you have done something wrong. It's just a reality of living on the road and living in the conditions that we live in. You're exposing yourself to a whole new world. You have dared to step out of your comfort zone of your sticks and bricks house, your neighborhood, your community, into an unknown. Every couple of weeks, I am in a different unknown. That's another thing. So every new place that I end up in is a new adjustment period. Adjusting to the sounds, adjusting to the traffic, adjusting to who might be around, walking around my area, going on hikes and exploring to see what's around and to be able to identify potential party spots and, oh, do I want to move? So not only are you going to have a big adjustment period when you jump off the ledge into this lifestyle, every single new place that you go is going to have another adjustment period. So you're constantly in flux. You're constantly you constantly are learning and absorbing new information. So you're going to be doing a lot of adjusting and a lot of learning and a lot of absorbing. So let's talk now about number 3. And number 3 is about self-care. It is really important before you head out on the road to think about the ways that you are going to take care of yourself. I talked about a few in number 2 when I talked about fear and having a plan, but I'm talking about on a more regular, consistent basis. What are you going to do to feed yourself, to take care of yourself? Along the way, for all the different ways that you need care, whether it's having a community of people that you can see and hang out with from time to time, or whether it's a community that you can just call up and vent to or express concerns with, or whether you just have a couple good friends or family members that you can call once a week, just so that you have some kind of grounding, so that you're not feeling so, willy-nilly just kind of floating around in space out here. For you, the self-care might be you need some kind of an anchor. What is that anchor going to be for you? For me, it was Capone and also therapy. Having therapy once a week while I'm on the road, that has been an anchor for me. It has been a grounding source for me, a grounding force. Even no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I always have that phone call once a week that's going to ground me and also give me some structure in my life. And of course, Capone did that for me as well. So what is going to be your anchor? What is going to be your grounding force? Are you going to call your mother every week? Or are you going to call your son every week or once a month or whatever it is for you? I think it's really important when you're heading out into this lifestyle that you do have some connection to something that is going to comfort you, something that's going to fulfill you, that's going to give you community, it's going to give you a sense of whatever it is you need, a sense of belonging or a sense of fulfillment or someone to talk to. So I think that's the number one thing, is what kind of community are you going to need when you're on the road? And again, back to me, I like being alone, so I don't need a lot of community as far as people that I travel with and people that I camp with. But I do have, not only therapy, but I've got my little sister, my mentee, big brothers, big sisters. I talk to her pretty consistently. I also have friends that I talk to on a fairly consistent basis. So I do have, and even more now that I'm on the road, I've got more nomad friends and I'm keeping in touch with them more. And so I think it is important. You might just need to talk to somebody once a month. You might need to talk to somebody once a week. You might need in the beginning to talk to somebody every day. Whatever it is for you, that's fine. It's for you. This is your life. Do what you need to do to take care of you. Don't compare yourself to anybody else, but just set a plan on how you're going to need to kind of feel anchored and grounded and what kind of community you're going to need. I recommend planning for that before you get on the road and sticking to that plan for as long as you need to. The second really big thing about self-care that I want to talk about, that I think you really need to listen to. This is a big one. When we're living on the road the way we are, it's especially important to know how to set boundaries and say no. And that's really hard for a lot of women. I think a lot of the dangerous situations we get into are because we have a hard time saying no and setting boundaries. Somebody comes up, somebody that you don't know very well, or somebody that you have just an icky feeling about says, hey, do you mind if I camp near you? Just because you don't want to be a bitch, you don't want to be mean, you want to be nice, you might say yes. That's when bad things happen. That's when dangerous things happen. Again, we haven't listened to our gut. We haven't set a boundary. We didn't want that person to camp near us, but we were afraid of what they would think about us. And so we didn't say no. I encourage you, before you get on the road, practice setting good boundaries. Maybe you're 3 or 4 years away from actually hitting the road. It's a good time to start practicing now. Start with family members. Start with friends. If you don't want to do something, say no. If you don't want somebody infringing upon your space, say no. Can you please back off? Or no, you know what, I'm not comfortable with that. It's a really good time to start practicing it now. You don't necessarily want to have to practice it when you're on the road. If you become more comfortable with it before you even get on the road, even better. Then you're not even going to have to think twice about it. So learning how to say no, setting boundaries is going to be extremely important while you're on the road. Another tip I want to give you right now that I learned when I was, again, approached by that guy on the Highway of Tears. This is something that just automatically came to me, and I reflected on it afterward and realized how smart it was without me even realizing how smart I was being. I get asked all the time, are you traveling alone? 99% of the time I'm like, yeah, you know, isn't it great? I love my life. I have a great time. When that guy on the Trail of Tears approached me as I was sitting there having lunch, and he came around my rig acting really weird, and he said, are you traveling alone? I knew. I just knew. And I said, no, I'm not. Now, women, I think especially, have a tendency to over-explain. Actually, everybody has a tendency to over-explain when you're not telling the truth, right? You embellish, you give a lot more detail than is necessary. And I want to advise you right now to start practicing no, I am not, without any more information. No, my boyfriend's inside taking a nap, or no, you know, my husband is on his way, or whatever. And I'm going to tell you why. Here is why. Again, my gut was a lot smarter than I was in the moment. I didn't realize my brain was gathering tons and tons and tons of data about this guy that I consciously wasn't even aware of in the moment. What I realized later, when he was lurking around the back of my rig, and my conscious mind was like, oh, he's checking out my rig, he's gonna ask me, maybe he's interested in buying my rig, because that happens sometimes. What I didn't realize in the moment, that I didn't realize until like maybe weeks later when I was making the video, he was looking in my back window. He wanted to see if there was anybody else in the rig. And he had lingered back there long enough that if I said, and he said, hey, are you traveling alone? And I said, no, my boyfriend is inside, he would have known I was lying. So I realized, after kind of playing this whole thing over in my mind hundreds of times after it happened, I realized at that point that the less information you can give in a situation like that, the safer you're going to be. I thought about it on other occasions, that if somebody came up to me and said, hey, are you traveling alone? And I felt the need to say, no, you know, my husband is inside, I'm not wearing a ring. So again, I would have been caught in a lie, which would have left me vulnerable because they would have known I was lying. But if somebody comes up and says, hey, are you traveling alone? And I just said, no, I'm not. They have no idea. Is he out for a walk? Is he at the store? Is he going to come back? Is a whole group going to come back? That leaves the possibilities endless, wide open, and it makes it a lot more difficult for you to be a victim. So I want you to practice that. I want you to practice, have your friends ask you, hey, are you traveling alone? And I want you to practice, no, I'm not. Period. End of story. No embellishment, no extra information. No, I'm not. And then walk away. Because like I said, hundreds of times I've said, yeah, I'm traveling alone, and we have a great conversation. But in that case, I said, no, I am not. And I got up and I went inside and I locked the door. So if you're in a situation like that where you feel you need to say, no, I'm not, walk away and get to safety. Because your gut is telling you something that maybe you're not aware of yet. I think it's also a good idea to practice no. Just no. Or, you know, do you mind if I camp next to you? You know what? No, I'm not comfortable with that. Period. No, I don't think so. And then if the person doesn't listen to you, if the person still insists or kept saying, oh, come on, it won't be, blah, 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 then that means you need to move. If that happens, then you need to move. I had a situation a couple years ago with someone who literally barged into my life by knocking on my door when I explicitly said, please don't knock on my door. And this person was, you know, oh, I just want to help you, blah, blah, blah. You know, I just want to help you. Well, me not listening to my gut and thinking, oh, I need to be nice because this person just wants to help me. So he barged into my life. I then invited him further into my life, and it actually ended up very bad. It ended up with him not taking no for an answer. There were some situations that got very weird. He got very territorial. I mean, things just got really weird. And then at one point he was in my camp with me and I was like, I just need you to go away right now. And he's like, no, you don't really mean that. And I was like, no, really, I don't need your help. No, yeah, you do. No, yeah, you do. It ended up just uncomfortable. Didn't end up bad. I wasn't in danger. At least I don't think so. But the person would not take no for an answer. And if I had set my boundary or held my boundary up front, he literally barged into my life. Oh, I know you don't want people knocking on your door, but I should have put my foot down then and said, yeah, no, you know what? I don't like people knocking on my door, and you have to go now. You have to read The Gift of Fear, because there's a story about a woman who gets raped by doing this exact same thing that I am just explaining right now. I didn't listen to my gut. And instead of setting my foot down and saying, yeah, you're right, I invited him further into my life. It's really important to learn how to hold your boundaries. It's really important to learn how to say, no, I'm not traveling alone. You need to go away now. I'm not comfortable with that. And if there is even the slightest pushback on that, you need to go. Plain and simple, you need to go. That's self-care. What are you going to do to take care of yourself on the road? Number one, what are you going to do to have an anchor? What are you going to do for community? How much community do you need? And number two, how are you going to take care of yourself as far as setting boundaries, learning to say no, learning how to identify a potentially dangerous situation, learning what your out is going to be, setting a plan. And, you know, the other parts of self-care are, what do you need to be a happy, healthy individual? I've learned that I need not only physical stimulation, and that's why I go on these hikes. I need to be physically challenged. I need to be challenged in my life, or I get bored. And Carolyn and boredom don't do well. I spiral and I self-destruct. I don't do well with boredom. And this is something I have learned about myself through therapy. And so what are some of the things that you need to do to stay happy and healthy? And the other thing that I need is intellectual stimulation. And that's something that I have been striving to incorporate into my life more. And that usually means friends who are intelligent and can have real, deep, meaningful conversations. I don't do small talk. I hate small talk. I like conversations that matter. And that's why some people love my channel, and that's why some people hate my channel. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that there isn't social injustice and all the other things that I care about. And that's the way I am with my relationships as well. I don't do superficial relationships. That's why I only have a few people in my life, because I like deep, intentional, I guess is a good way to put it, relationships. And that is one of the ways that I get the intellectual stimulation that I need. And I've also been looking at some other ways, classes, Udemy, if you're not familiar, UDEMY, masterclass I've signed up for. I even thought about going back to school, maybe getting my law degree. So these are all, for me, works in progress, and thinking about the different things that I need for self-care, the things that I need to be able to make sure I stay happy, healthy, and content. Because just because I'm living out here doing this, it isn't everything. It's not everything I need to be a complete happy person. So what do you need? What are the things that you need in your life to take care of yourself, to be a, fulfilled, happy, healthy person? I hope this video has been helpful for you in really explaining what you can expect as a full-time RVer. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you learned something and what you're practicing to get ready for your RV or van life. I'll see you next time. In the meantime, be happy, be free, and be kind. Thanks for hanging with me.